This little fella here is the king of gin, the juniper berry. But if you think that a berry is just a berry, you couldn't be more wrong. So let's have a look at this little fella here and let me show you 3 of my favorite gins at the moment if you like a juniper forward gin. Hi guys, and welcome to High on Gin. In this episode, I want to take a closer look at the juniper berry. But before we do that, I must turn on the nerd alarm. This just might get a little bit nerdy, so if you don't want to get all the details about the juniper berry, you can just skip to the part where I talk about my 3 favorite juniper forward gins at the moment. But if you're still here, let's talk about the king of gin. As you probably know, the predominant flavor in a gin must be juniper. Otherwise, you can't really call it a gin. But since it's not stated how much juniper you should use, the definition is pretty vague, and therefore it's up to the master distillers to define how much he or she wants to use in the gin and then still call it a gin. And it's also up to the master distillers to choose what kind of juniper berry they want to use. Because if you think a berry is just a berry, you couldn't be more wrong. First of all, there are more than 50 different species of the juniper berry. And although the Juniperus communis is the most common used juniper berry in a gin, there is such a huge difference in the berry itself, as you know, water and soil and the surrounding has a huge impact on the final flavor profile of the berry, and therefore a huge impact on the taste of the gin itself. And the berry grows in almost any country on the northern hemisphere. It is one of the toughest trees, which is why you will find it almost anywhere. All over Europe and Mexico, North America, in Canada, in Iceland and Greenland, in Japan and in China. And you'll even find the tree in altitudes of up to 3,500 meters. So you can imagine a berry from a tree grown in high altitudes in Alaska doesn't have the same taste as a berry grown in Mexico, although it just might be the same species. And it takes the tree between 18 to 24 months to mature the berry. To start with, the berries are green, but they will over time change into this dark purple, brown bluish color. And if you look at the berry itself, it contains several different aroma molecules, and the aromas are created and strengthened depending on the species, the minerals in the soil, the amount of sun it gets, the amount of water it gets, and so on and so on. So allow me to be a little bit technical just for a minute. The primary flavor in the juniper berry is, of course, the piney flavor that you'll find in pine trees, of course, and that we know so well in a gin. This piney flavors comes from alpha-pinene, which is a compound and forms approximately half of the total aroma molecules in the berry. But you will also find things like sabanine, which stands for up to 15% of the total aroma molecules in the berry. And sabanine provides an additional earthy spiciness to the berry, something that you'll also find in black peppers, for example. And you'll find citrusy aromas up to 5%. It's called limonene, that you also find in, normally you'll find in peels of lemons and oranges and limes and grapefruits. And there are boneol aromas that provides this additional woody flavor to the berry. And there are farnesene in the berry that will give the berry a hint of green floral notes that you'll find in, let's say, green apples. So these different aroma molecules will develop differently as the berry grows, and the final combination of aromas will be determined will be determining the end results of the juniper berry flavor profile. And as an example, the floral notes from the farnesene are developed in the last stage of the maturing process. So if a berry tree grows in a very sunny and warm area, the floral notes are more likely to be more dominant than if the berry grows in, let's say, the Nordics. In contrast to this, the piney and the woody notes you will find from the beginning of the development of the berry in these young green berries. So even when a master distiller buys the same juniper berry from the same region or the same producers, they could find themselves in a situation where the juniper flavors in the gin taste very differently. And that is why master distillers like Desmond Payne and his team from Beefeater Gin does up to 200 tests with juniper berry each year to get the flavors of his juniper berry just right. They want Beefeater to taste just the same every time. And there's a reason why true gin nerds like master distiller Henrik Elsner from ELG Gin in Denmark uses a gas chromatograph to analyze the compounds in his botanicals, besides using his nose, of course, and tasting the extract and using his experience. By using this gas chromatograph, it gives him the possibility to get a visual overview of the content in a berry and how much of it that is actually present. And if you think, why doesn't everybody just buy that machine? Well, for one, it's a pretty expensive machine. So the next time you think, how hard can it be to do gin? Just think about how many different variations there actually are when making a gin. And think how hard it actually is to do a similar batch when the first batch is sold. It is actually harder than you think. If you love the juniper flavor in a gin, here is 3 juniper forward gins I would recommend you take a closer look at. Number 3. If you want to experience what a juniper berry truly means in a gin, you should see if you can get hold of this Mr. King's Gin, a limited release from Plymouth Gin that was sent onto the market in 2019. This gin only has 2 botanicals, juniper berry and orris root. And if you think, like I did when I first heard about this gin, that this must be a very one-dimensional gin with very limited taste experience, you are, as I was, very, very wrong. This ingenious gin, in all its simplicity, is a sensational gin. It really shows how many flavors that are packed in a juniper berry. The orris roots and the base alcohols are like vessels that lifts the gin and makes it flow into these waves of different taste experiences, from the juniper taste to the oiliness that you clearly feel in your mouth, and this long, earthy aftertaste. I had the pleasure of meeting a master distiller of Plymouth, Sean Harrison, on different occasions, at a private web meeting with him and at the Berlin Bar Convent in 2019. And here he explains how he had come across this very old recipe of Mr. King's Gin in the old archives of Plymouth Distillery, and how he knew how important the exact juniper had to be to work in this uber simple recipe. He knew that the regular juniper berry that they use at the distillery in Plymouth Gin wouldn't make it. So he began his search and ended up with these hand-picked juniper berries from Umbrian in Italy that was picked and taken straight to the distillery where they were hand-sorted and distilled. And if you think my short explanation of the complexity in a juniper berry was nerdy, wait till you talk to Sean. Boy, do this man knows his chemistry. It is so interesting to hear him talk about all the different elements that creates the taste in a particular juniper berry. So do yourself a favor and seek out a bottle of Mr. King's Gin. Enjoy it neat and see for yourself how much flavors so few botanicals can give. Number 2. Earlier I mentioned Henrik Elsner from ELG Gin, a master distiller from the northern parts of Zealand here in Denmark. He is what I would call the mad professor of gin, a true gin nerd in so many ways. And this is meant in the best possible way. He reminds me of one of my childhood cartoon characters named Professor Balthazar, a genius science that uses his magical machine to create this magical liquid that can solve any problem. And that same goes for Henrik Elsner and his Müller pot still. Henrik has a Master of Science and a PhD in organic chemistry and has a really good feel for creating premium spirits such as gin, of course, but also marc and absinthe, brandy and aquavit. And when it comes to gin, he has created 6 very different versions of gin by using the same 3 ingredients in all 6 gins: juniper, coriander seed and carrot. With his scientific knowledge and craftsmanship, he knows the way of each botanical and how to get the different flavors out of it. And instead of making a London dry gin, he makes his gin as a compound gin, so he can treat each of the 3 botanicals very differently when it comes to things like making the perfect cut in the distillation process. Normally, when you talk about distillation process, you talk about the head, the heart, and the tail. That refers to the first that comes out of a pot still, the main product, and then the last that comes out of the distillation process. As an example, Henrik believes that you should have more of the head in the distillation of juniper, and you should stop much sooner when you are distilling coriander seed. So by distilling each botanical by itself, he can tweak the end results into perfection with different flavor profiles. Henrik Elsner's ELG No. 1 is a real classic juniper-forward gin. He uses up to 10 times more juniper in this gin than other main gin brands would use. That is also the reason why the gin in the gin and tonic sometimes seems a little bit cloudy when you look at it. It's because of the amount of oils from the juniper berry used in this gin. It got a gold medal at the 2020 IWSC contest with a whopping 98 points out of 100 and being named one of the 8 best gins in the world. So if you haven't tried it yet, you really should. Go classic with a fever tree Indian tonic and a tiny piece of lemon peel and a lot of ice, and feel the absolute pleasure of having a gin created by the master distiller himself. Number 1. At number 1 is an Australian beast of a juniper gin. This is Juniper Freak from Never Never Distilling Company. This Navy strength version of their triple juniper gin is simply divine. I don't know what it is about Australia and gin, but boy do they know how to make gin down under. And Never Never Distilling Company is right up there among the very best. They have made it their signature to make juniper the centerpiece of their gin portfolio. Therefore, the gin is made through processing juniper in 3 distinct ways: steeping the juniper for 24 hours, pot distillation, and then vapor distillation. And each step effectively concentrates the juniper character to the max, and it really shows in their gin. Taste the gin neat, and you will feel this super oiliness from all the botanicals that blends perfectly with this very high ABV, and that smacks you in the face, but in this lovely way. And I know it sounds crazy, because this is a crazy gin. When we here in our house use this gin for a gin and tonic, we often use a fever tree aromatic tonic. The tonic and its slightly more spiciness and bitterness suits this full-grown gin very good. The gin needs a tonic that can stand up for itself and give a proper fight, so to say. So that's it, dear friends. I hope that you enjoyed watching, and please let me know in the comments below what your favorite juniper gin is. Or let me know if you have any questions or comments. And please remember to subscribe to my Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube channel and get much more new and exciting info on gin. Until next time.